Welcome to the next part of object-oriented programming introduction. In the previous video, we have seen about the concepts of union and enumeration data type apart from structure, and in objective of this video will be to make you understand the concept of classes and objects in C++, the access specifiers and how to use them in C++, and finally whatever member function are defined inside the class, how to define the member functions. There are definition ways in C++, so we are going to see that. Outcome of this session will be to design the object oriented solutions using class and objects, and also defining the member function inside as well as outside the class. So basically we have gone through the structure and seen about how structure has to be defined, how we declare a structure. After the declaration of a structure, we complete the structure using the closing brace and semicolon, and inside the main function we have to create a structure variable like %p1 and access the members of the structure using the structure variable, that is access the member name, age and gender through p1 structure variable. As for example, if I am writing enter name and I am writing p1 dot name. So to access the structure variable name from the main function, you will have to use the structure variable p1. In the similar manner, gender and age has been taken. To display the same thing, we are using cout p1.name, p1.age and p1.gender. So this we have seen was a part of a structure. Now if you see the two parts in this structure, the first block which shows that first thing we are doing is taking the name, age and gender from the user, and second part we are displaying the name, age and gender. So we are actually doing two tasks, one that is input task and second that is output task. So we can convert this into function, input function and output function. So if you do this, how the program goes on, if we are writing functions, the function has to be defined inside the structure. As for example, we are taking the 3 data members. Now I am taking input function. I did not close the structure after this structure data members are completed. We do not close the structure but write the function. So we are taking input function, declaring those input function and writing the code for input function, and again output function we are displaying the value. But while displaying and while taking the input, we have not used the key structure variable p1. Why? Because name, age and gender, they are belonging to the structure person, and input function is also belonging to the same structure person. If you observe that output function is also belonging to the structure person, and after that we have closed the semicolon, that is completed the structure declaration. So input and output function also becomes the members of structure person, hence they can use name, age and gender directly without using structure variable. Now this was a part of a structure. So now structure has totally 5 members, 3 data members and 2 member functions. Now if you want to access the name, age and gender through a structure, we can write p1.name. We have to create an %p1 structure variable and access it, right, p1.name, p1.age. But now we can access that using input function and output function, and that can be called using the structure variable as p1.input and p1.output. So this is how the structure can be converted using function. Now instead of structure, if we are doing a class, class is also known as a user defined data type, just like a structure, which is collection of data member and member function. But as you observe, all the functions or members, when you are accessing, it will execute well in case of structure. Now consider a class. The class begins with a keyword that is class, and this is a body structure of the class, similar to that of a structure where we have data member and member function. But here one keyword comes, that is access specifier, which is of very much importance of class, because if in the previous program, if you observe, we have defined p1.input and p1.output and we call it from the main function, we do not mention the access specifier, whereas for a C++ class you have to declare a access specifier, that we will see here. Now in this declaration of the class student, we can observe there are 2 data members, ID and name, and two member functions, that is read data and print data. Now, this visibility of access specifier for data members and member functions can be of three types: public, private and protected. Public means if you are declaring those members as public members or public member functions, that they can be accessed by the own member functions also of that particular class, as well as non-member functions of the program which is not the part of a class. Private means it can access only the member functions which belong to that class, and protected members means it is similar to private but can be access the member functions of the immediate derived class. So, protected we are going to see at the time of inheritance. We will prefer these two access specifiers, that is public and private now. Now, default, all items defined in the class are by default private. Consider the class declaration with access specifier. If I am using class private public colon, whatever is written in the private part, after that if the public colon is start, whatever written after public colon is considered to be public. So, you can have private members also and public members in the class also. So, for example, here std_id and std_name are both private data members, and whereas read data and print data are public member function. So, keywords private and public actually specify the access level of the members of the class, and by default the member, if you do not write whether it is private or public, by default all the members become private. That is, they cannot be accessed by the non-member function, nor not even main function direct. And usually the data members of class are declared in private section and member functions in public section. So, for example, if I am writing with the help of class person, the private data member I am taking, string name, age and gender are considered to be private data members, whereas public I am taking the input function and output function to be written inside the public part. So, here class close, and inside the main function again, though they have been made public, input output has been public, they cannot be accessed from the main function directly, that is the non-member function. Main cannot access input function and output function directly. It has to use the object of that particular class first, person p1, and then write p1.input and p1.output. So, this is an example of a class. So, you can try this assignment, fill in the blank spaces to observe this. It is a very interesting one. You can observe and try writing the program. Now, class member function. The member function which we have seen, input function and output function, those are known as the member functions. These can be defined either inside the class or they can be defined outside the class. So, there are two definitions, inside the class and outside the class. Now, how to define a member function inside the class? We have seen the previous example itself. When we define member functions defined inside the class, we do not need scope resolution operator, and also we do not need a class name to access. That we will see here. For example, if a class circle is there, you have double radius, set radius, get diameter are defined inside the class, whereas area and circumference are not defined inside the class, as they do not have their function definition body. So, if a function declaration is there, that function has to be defined outside the class. So, set radius, get diameter here are the functions which are defined inside the class. For example, the same program, if you observe void input, we have written the same program. These two functions, that is input and output, if you observe, they are defined inside the class. Okay. Now, when the member functions have to be defined outside the class, you use binary scope resolution operator. So, how is the syntax? You have to have the return type, class name, scope resolution operator and member function name. To define any member function outside the class, two things is necessary. You have to declare that function inside the class. First, you have to declare it. Inside the class, you need to declare it, and outside the class, you need to define it. To define this member function outside the class, as already discussed, you have to write return type, class name, scope resolution operator and member function name. So for example, the same program we are writing here, but observe now input function and output function are just declared inside the class. They are not being defined here, and we close the class person. Now to define them outside the class, we need void, that is its return type, then class name, that is person, scope resolution operator, and the function name, that is input. And the body doesn't change. We are doing the same task again by the input function, taking three values, name, gender and age, and output is also doing the same job. And main function also, you have to just create the object of class person and access it using p1.input and p1.output. So there is just a representation of how to define the member function inside the class and outside the class. So we have seen by defining a member function outside the class, we need to declare them inside the class as shown over here, void input semicolon, void output semicolon. Inside the class they need to be declared, and outside the class when they are being defined, you have to use class name and scope resolution operator. So this is all about the functions. You can try an assignment of designing class student with its roll number, fees, data members, and set roll number, display student data, member functions. So there are two member functions, set roll number and display student data, and two data members, roll number and fees. So create two different student objects and set their roll numbers and fees and display their data using member function inside the class and member function outside the class. So you take set roll number defined inside the class and display student data defined outside the class. So this video we have studied about user defined data type, that is class, and how to define the member function inside the class and outside the class. Thank you for watching the video, and do like and subscribe my channel. Thank you.